This is the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. Here we talk everything paganism, heathenism, witchcraft, mystery, and mythology. Sit back, relax, open your mind, and then let's take you back to the days of our ancestors. Welcome everyone to the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. Welcome everybody to yet another edition of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. My guest for today is Mr. Thomas Sheridan. Thomas, thank you so much for coming on. Introduce yourself to the public. Introduce yourself to the good people.
Hi, Stinge. It's great to be here finally. We had a few false alarms, but I finally made it. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Thomas Sheridan, and I live in Ireland. I've done a lot of things. I've written some books on everything from true crime, psychopathy in the corporate workplace, to paganism, druidry, the ancient megaliths of Ireland, Atlantis, occultism, the occult history of Germany. And I've made lots of videos. I've annoyed lots of people too. And that's basically
Yeah, so you've done pretty much everything across the whole spectrum.
Yeah, well, I mean, I grew up quite poor, so I said if I was ever going to get any opportunities in life, I was going to take every single one of them and my philosophy from the time I was a little kid was if I was ever going to get a saddle on the devil's back, I was going to ride it, and that was like, make sure I'd do that.
Yeah, because how is it growing up in Ireland? Like, it's a predominant Catholic country, and you are a pagan. So, how did you manage to find your path?
Well, I grew up in an urban area. I grew up in the north side of Dublin, which was I grew up in a very sort of tough working class neighborhood. Fortunately, my family didn't really care about religion, and I wasn't pressured or anything. I did the usual things the schools make you do, like your first Holy Communion and all that nonsense. But I was never had any problems with that, and not at all. Actually, never been bothered by it. I think you'd be surprised how tolerant. Well, they used to be how tolerant Irish people were towards paganism, because it's not a million miles from like Orthodox Catholicism in many ways. You'd find that like to be much more hostility towards paganism in traditionally Presbyterian countries, particularly countries that had strong histories of like puritanical Presbyterianism. So, like Scotland, parts of England, Holland, maybe, definitely Sweden, Finland. I know Holland has a much more tolerant tradition, but in Germany, terrible persecution of anything even remotely considered pagan. We never had a Lutheran culture here, so we avoided all that. So honestly, it was never any problems at all. And he said it to someone, the worst that would happen was they'd laugh at you. You're running around stones into the nude and this kind of thing. You wouldn't get any. I've never once encountered any kind of hostility or anything like that.
Interesting. I know that Catholicism, there is still a lot of paganism to be found in there. I've talked about this many times. Even a good friend of mine who is a Catholic, he's like pretty hardcore Catholic, but he's a good guy. He told me, you know what, just become Catholic. Like, it's basically the same thing anyway. It's just, it's the right faith. But how did you manage to what was your pagan path like? How did you come to find the gods, or how did they find you? I guess I should ask.
When I was about 9 or 10 years old, we were taken on a primary school trip to Tara and Newgrange, which is not that far from Dublin, which is major megalithic centres from the Neolithic period right up to up until the Christian times of Tara. I mean, it was a sort of a centre of Ireland for thousands of years, and of the ancient kings, and it was the last place on earth that you had the ceremony of the king symbolically marrying the goddess Hera, and before the Christians, made it illegal or whatever, and So they took us to Newgrange, and we went inside the passageways and saw all the ancient carvings, and it just was like one of these moments. It's like, well, how come no one ever told me about this? This is like what this is real. It was like I was in entering a Tolkien novel. This kind of thing. And then they took us afterwards, later in the day, to a church in a city nearby called Drogheda, and in the church is a head of a Catholic martyr. His head was chopped off, and he's now a saint. And his head is supposed to be perfectly preserved, and it looks like it's been rotting away for centuries. But he's supposed to be uncorrupted. But it made me physically ill and sick being in the church, and made me feel I was in a place of evil. But when I was in the actual inside the passage chambers in Newgrange, I felt wonderful. And so the next day in school, the teacher's teaching us all about this guy that his head has been chopped off, and he's a great martyr for Catholicism and blah blah and blah blah blah. And I says, "Oh, teacher, can you tell us more about Newgrange and the Boyne Valley?" And he goes, "Oh, that was just a place where they worship the dead," which is ironic because they took us to see the head of a dead person inside a Catholic church. The only time we worshipped the dead was actually in the Catholic Church. So that was like a moment. Then I started getting my bicycle, and Ireland is absolutely full of ancient sites and megaliths. I mean, there's 40,000 of the ringed enclosures alone, and they're everywhere. They're in cities and everything. And so I started getting my bicycle and cycling around North Dublin, looking for round towers and anything that gave me a clue of a past they didn't teach us about. And then they also, when I was in school, a bit younger than that, they used to give in the Irish language, Irish mythology lessons, and there was amazing curriculum in school books. They had beautiful Celtic illustrations of like the gods and goddesses from ancient Ireland, and that was a huge one as well, because the school book whoever put together was like a comic book, so it was really lavishly illustrated with beautiful Celtic art. So that was a big major one too. But you see, I grew up in an English speaking part of Ireland, and Irish was not my first language. So they almost like they did it in such a way that it was difficult for me to even learn about it. The kind of thing I have to do it in another language. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that sounds familiar. Ireland is a country that I still would love to visit. I would love to see all those megalithic sites. It's just times are a bit tough now, unfortunately, especially with the whole still the whole quote unquote pandemic thing going on. It's still there's still some bullshit about that, of course. I heard from your videos that was particularly bad in Ireland. Like you were one of the worst, even worse than Canada.
Horrible lockdown. Everything was closed for like a long time. It's completely opened up now. You come over now, it's fine. There's no problems. But it was obnoxious. It was deliberately done by a government who was being sexually excited by the fact of keeping us prisoners. It's just all these creepy globalist S&M freaks in government who were turned on by, and then also played on the kind of darkness of the Irish character. The kind of like they gave the ordinary normie in Ireland a new religion, and the religion was COVID, and they worshipped it like a god.
Yeah.
Fanatically.
Yeah, well, we have those creepy crawlers here in the Netherlands too, unfortunately, but we never had those hard lockdowns. Fortunately enough, we had some issues, but we made it through eventually. And the ironic thing is, I've talked with someone else about this on my podcast, Georgina Rose. It was actually in that time, like during the first lockdown, end of 2019, beginning of 2020, when the pagan revival like really kicked off, because people were, locked in, taken away from nature. And I mean, the saying is, of course, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Is there anything particular in Ireland that hints at a pagan revival? Because I know it's strong, but it's not like really out there yet. It's still a lot of talk in groups and on the internet. I know you've been particularly busy with that and trying to get people together IRL. How is that? How is that working out? How's that going?
Well, that was one of the great things about the lockdown. I mean, Christianity better not be real because I'm going straight to hell. Because I, and I don't, I probably got or encouraged thousands of, if not tens of thousands of Irish people to return back to the old ways. That was a big deal because they were forsaken during those. Where was their Jesus? Where was their God? Where was their everything during those times when they were locked down? And I believe, and I'm not being narcissistic here. I know it's true because they tell me all the time. That I constantly meet people who say I used to be Catholic or I used to be Protestant. I now consider myself a pagan. Now a huge part of this change was that a lot of Irish people who didn't particularly like Christianity had a very false view of paganism because they confused it with Wicca and neo-pagan. And the biggest barrier there was trying to get them over. You see, Wicca was very big in Ireland, and that comes out of a strong magical tradition here that came out of things like the Golden Dawn and Kabbalism and stuff that were brought from like aristocrats through the pop. Ireland was a major center for Wicca for a long time, and especially in the 70s. And you had your man Farah here. He was like the god of Wicca, and him and his wife were living in Ireland, writing, basically writing all this stuff. I'm not putting anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that was not paganism. So Irish people grew up thinking paganism was Wicca and this nonsense, and they were kind of there was very little knowledge about the Indo-European pagan side of things. So, and then you had other kinds of things. You had other nonsense like this Celtic church thing. There's this belief that the Celtic church, the original Celtic church of Ireland, was somehow pagan, a mixture of pagan and Christianity, when it was 100% Jewish. It was completely rabbinical. That's one of the greatest lies ever peddled, that the Celtic Church of Ireland was somehow a mixture of. It was actually, we actually ironically became more pagan after the Synod of Whitby, when the Celtic Church was abolished and Catholicism was brought in. I mean, they had things like circumcision, and women were forbidden from going to church. And they had things like the Sabbath was held on a Saturday, and they kept kosher and stuff like this. And here I was being told that this was the true Celtic religion of Ireland. Catholic Church was completely Second Temple rabbinical. The early Roman Church was extremely Jewish, and that's what first came to Ireland. Now, I'm not saying anything wrong with it, but that's what it was. But there was always nonsense peddled by these kind of New Age hippies saying, "Oh, they used to worship Lou and Jesus in their ceremonies." Now, what are you on about, And then they would say things like, see, the patron saint of Ireland is Saint Bridget, who's actually the goddess Breed, who's basically she's kind of like a Shiva type character in terms of the pantheon when you really dig into it, and you compare it to like the Vedic thing, and they were saying like, oh, the Celtic Church venerated her. No, she was forbidden. All the early saints. It was the Catholics who actually made it okay to incorporate the old gods and goddesses as saints and stuff like that. So that was a great myth. So it's taken me a while to sort of deprogram people from misunderstandings, is the way I'd put it, and just say, oh no, and I wrote a book called The Druid Code, which kind of like lays it out in very careful language that, there's a proto spiritual tradition going back into Indo-European times that we share with the Hindus in India, and we also have here, and it contains comparative archetypes of the gods that's all over the world. I think one of the videos I made that really changed things, and this is about a year and a half ago, where I said that, and it really strongly rang with people in Ireland, is when I said that Celtic pagans have no issues with Nordic pagans. They have no issues with Hindus. Hindus have no issues with Iberian pagans. That's just because ultimately there was never a religious war in ancient times. There was wars over resources. There was wars over land. There was wars over lots of things, but there was no wars over my God was better than yours. That didn't really start until this thing from the Middle East took over. And you have the concept of jihad and crusade that became incorporated into our cultures. But I was very much of the line that, in ancient times, an Irish Celtic pagan could encounter a Slavic pagan, or even a Hindu, and say things like, "Well, we have a god who represents a raven who carries souls to heaven." Oh, what do you know? We have the Valkyries, and all the archetypes were all spooling back to these commonalities that were sort of like core archetypes. And that was a huge way. If any of you out there are trying, I know it's a weird thing, it's like convert people to paganism, because we don't convert anyone, but it's funny. But if you want to help people find their path, a great way of doing that is to talk about how there was no interspiritual conflicts between any of the pagan traditions. Like when I was in Sri Lanka, I was going to the Hindu temple every day, perfectly happy, and I was like, this is what it would be like if Constantine hadn't issued the Edict of Milan. This is what our religions would be like today. So that was, yeah. So I think I've done a good job there, a good start anyway, and I'm not finished yet. But I'd absolutely say that paganism is now coming back big time in Ireland, because they now realise you don't have to be some idiot wearing a robe and holding a staff and calling yourself Merlin. They realise you can be a guy who dresses like me, you or me, works in an office, works in a factory, or doesn't do anything and looks like a regular guy or woman walking down the street, but are a pagan. And that was a huge one to get over. This kind of this weirdo outside a yurt with a staff calling himself, whatever. That was all. That they were all huge inhibitors to the true restoration of paganism, which I believe is, like yourself and other people, it's happening now.
Yeah, no, that's indeed the one thing that's always been associated with paganism. Those weirdos out on the streets, or first impressions of paganism are often what I like to call the TikTok Vikings. The people with the shaved sides, and doing or like placing Lothbrok after their name because I'm a Viking.
Yeah.
I think that like those people are indeed a great inhibitor, which is why it's so important that we show them like how it's actually like, and indeed the pantheons are a lot the same, and they do come from the same source. Of course, I have been discovering that in my in my years, in my research, and just talking with other people as well. And like I was curious, how does Celtic paganism relate to Nordic paganism or Germanic paganism? Because there is still a bit of a difference, between the let's say the Tuatha De Danann and the Aesir, for example. A lot of commonalities, but still very much different. So how would you relate that to each other?
It's a very difficult thing to do, and I'll tell you why. Both the Nordic tradition and the Celtic tradition were written down by Christian monks. Before that, they were strictly oral traditions, and they were written. I mean, there was some writing and things like Ulm in Ireland and in the runes in the Furtek in Nordic world, but ultimately the stories, the Eddas, and the mythological cycles, the annals of Ireland, were written down by Christian monks. Now you have to remember this is a kind of a great reset kind of thing, where they were taking the past and they were Jesus it up, Abrahaming it up, So you had situations like where, the Partholon, the first people who supposed to came to Ireland, were like, Noah's children from Noah's granddaughter from Egypt and stuff like this. And we've had a terrible problem, awful problem in Ireland with British Israelism, which was like a weird cult that took place among like wealthy Protestants in Scotland, in England and America in the last century, late in the early 1900s. And they were obsessed with connecting, anything in ancient times to the Bible. So therefore, the Tuatha De Danann, which means the tribe of the goddess Tanu, was actually the tribe of Daniel from the Bible, the lost trials of Israel. And we're still living with that. Or Scotland was named after an Egyptian princess called Scotia. We're still living with this awful nonsense, that's pushed here by these British Israelites. Even in the alternative scene, it's a big, huge problem. And so that's still going on. The legacies of those monks that started writing the stuff down, like Sorensen in Iceland and the Christian monks at Clonmacnoise here in Ireland, they stay, and Iona in Scotland, we're still living with that legacy of their distortions of the truth. However, when I wrote the book, The Druid Code, that was the purpose. It was trying to find data points where you could say, okay, this is like this, and this is like this, and can this lead back to this? And they were like archetypal punch points, right? Where there were commonalities across all the pantheons, right? Right, Greek, everything, Roman, everything. And then you sort of like, well, you have a kind of silver bullet then. You know that archetype is definitely correct in certain ways. Now, I've looked into the Nordic thing. If you start looking back, what they call Celtic really is just a name. Like that, we don't even know what the Celtic people were. It was just it basically means a Greek word, Celtoid, which means a foreigner. That's all it means. Someone who wasn't Greek or Roman. And so you had Italians who were Celts, and you had the Anatolians in Turkey who were Celts, and you had your guys in Holland, the Belgae and all those. They were all Celts and stuff like that, but they were not the same. They were different tribes. However, what is interesting is that if you look at the archaeological stuff, you do have a distinction between the Germanic kind of cultures in your part of the world, up in the Scandinavian, through Germany and down into parts of France, and you do have a Celtic kind of archaeological record in Europe, the Hallstatt culture type things, right? I forget the name of the word now, but the type of art begins with the letter T. It'll come to me. But anyway, they as the further you go back, they seem to merge deeper in the record. So I'm talking about the time, the Nerva sky disk. They were almost similar. So they all came from a similar root as well, but it was a Proto-European route that was kind of pre-Indo-European. So we're dealing with some very ancient things here. So the Celtic stuff, how does it differ? Well, it differs in the similar ways that it's very much based on the idea of heroic. They're heroic lords, okay? Well, you have Wotan and you have Odin in the Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, Viking, whatever you want to call them, pantheon. You'd have Cuchulainn, the Cuchulainn in Ireland, but they have been conflated with Jesus Christ, and that they try to make it. These monks wrote it down that he was making a sacrifice, but it wasn't. They died heroic warriors. This is why I've never believed the Jesus story was readily accepted by our ancestors, because there's too much of a heroic lord aspect within our pagan past to accept. So he just gave up and they nailed him to a cross. That would be considered by our ancestors to be extremely weak and extremely ineffectual in leadership. But now we look back on it, we know that's exactly what you want. They want you weak. They want you weak and submissive. But I've made a film, I don't know if you've seen it, called Who Stole the All-Father? And I basically showed that Odin is basically, Jesus Christ was basically Odin when the church was migrating into Northern Europe, the last place to become Christian. They basically took the symbol of Odin hanging from the Yggdrasil tree and converted it into Christ on the cross, because that's how they sold the story. And there's loads of fantastic archaeological artifacts like the sandback crosses in England, which show like a mixture of Votanic and rabbinical images of both Jesus and Wotan on either side of the cross, to say this guy Jesus is another Wotan, this kind of thing. So we when you hear people like Native Americans and say that we have been ravaged by the white man, I always say, no, we in Europe were the first ones to get it. We were ravaged by the Abrahamics. And what you were ravaged by was the same Abrahamics who stole our, via the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire just fell apart, not the pagan Roman Empire, the post-Constantine Roman Empire. So we're trying to pick up the pieces of our history as well. You're not alone in that regard. But the differences, not a lot. There's, very similar. There's a far stronger element, I think, on female aspects to the Celtic stuff. I think there's a far bigger thing there, and I think that's why it appeals to a lot of Wiccan types, because it's filled with that. I think that's probably one of the main reason it really took off in Ireland Wicca, was because of the female aspects of it. But in terms of the actual baseline archetypes, there, you have things like the belief in reincarnation. Although the Irish have a very interesting thing. This is another thing. You have to really dig to find any of this stuff because there's all kinds of gatekeepers, both within paganism here and in the churches. But the Irish concept of reincarnation was based on an idea called the Summit, which was the belief that the soul transmigrated through all different animals and into you, very similar to Hinduism. So
Hmm.
basically, you understood how to catch a salmon because at one point you may have been a salmon. You understood how to catch a deer because your soul may have one point been a deer. It moves through the different life forms and through the humans as well. And when you reach human, you sort of break that kind of um, zoomorphic,
Yeah.
animalistic cycle, and you move into a purely human cycle. So it's like, and then this is what was taught. Now another thing too was this, the Druids. The Druids is another thing that's often misinterpreted. This belief in the Druids. A lot of that is kind of Victorian romanticism. Now you'll have like they say that we know nothing. You talk to someone from the Anglo-Saxon world, and they say we know nothing about the Druids. Only propaganda from the Romans, and they don't understand that the Irish pantheon is filled with references to the Druids. I mean, it's just tons of stuff there, and that's more than complements and supplements what's in the Roman and Greek writings. And basically the Druids were lawmakers involved in counseling. They were very the magical part of it, the mystical religious part of it, was only one aspect of it. You know, that kind of thing. It was just one aspect. They were administrators, they were healers, they were doctors, very heavily involved in genealogies because they believed they were, when you think about geneticists, really, weren't they, in many ways? And that certain people, certain families were geared towards warriorship and this kind of thing. So if he marries her from her, the kids that they have will be really good in battle, this kind of thing. So they were clever that way. And there was a lot of that. So that was another one. But you have the sailors in the Nordic tradition, which there's a lot of nonsense about them as well that I've read over the years, that they try to make that they were gay men and drag queens and stuff like that. Yeah, but they were that was to put down the shamanic stuff, because I think the satyrs of the two groups, the satyrs were the nearest one to a proto shamanic understanding, and they were, we know that shamanism lasted much longer in Central Europe than it did out on these islands. So you had like the Magyar shamans, and they would dress up, and I think that the satyrs probably did something else to, this classic world shamanic thing of not being a human now and dressing up into something completely uncanny valley, is to use the term, and that way you're
Yeah.
out of a consciousness and into another world of consciousness. And I think the Christians said, "Oh, they just dressed like a bunch of queens and stuff like that," but they didn't understand that it was a shamanic expression.
Yeah, they tried to make it so that Odin by or Wotan by learning Seder, and he dressed as a woman, he was a cross dresser, and Loki was a fruit and all of that, because he's a shapeshifter, and the whole story about the wall built around Asgard, and that makes Loki a fruit somehow.
The Rainbow Bridge, the Rainbow Bridge.
Oh, girl, yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, but the whole like Abrahamic aspect, I have learned recently. I'm not sure if I like really agree with it. It's something that I'm still kind of mulling over, but that the whole all father thing, that Wotan is like kind of above all the other gods, is very much a Abrahamic belief as well. Like very much comes from the Abrahamic faith, that like you have one God and then you have all the other gods. I mean, Wotan, of course, he sticks. He's for sure. He's very powerful, but and that even the name All Father, the name that we love to use, um, that was very much a Abrahamic thing. He's the God for everyone, even though he's really not. Like I tried connecting with Wotan, and I had a very hard time doing so, and I don't think I'm ready for that yet. He is a strong, powerful God, so to call him the All Father, I don't know. Like Thor or Donar has always been more a god of the people, so it's very much easier to connect to him. Like he is the archetypal warrior god, if you will, together with Tyr or Tilas, the god of justice. So I thought that was interesting. It's something that like even 10 years down the line now, like 9, 10 years of being a practicing pagan, I'm still learning things, still learning new things, and that's also why I'm very happy to have you on, because you just know so much. You have talked about so much, and the whole druidry thing that has um, there is a major revival going on with that as well. I believe it's in certain parts of Europe. It's now the third most popular religion, or like in like I've seen articles float by that at least in Cornwall, which is of course more England, but that paganism is now considered the third religion, which is major, which is really really big.
Even in Israel, there's a huge pagan revival that you never hear about. I know Israeli pagans that are returning back to the old Canaanite gods and stuff like that. Is it? We are living in a time where something seems to be happening. There's definitely. I'll tell you what. My theory of paganism is that one time there was this jigsaw puzzle that had been made up of paganism, and it had everything in Europe and Asia, everything the Indo-European interconnected. And then the Abrahamics came along and they threw all the pieces on the ground. And ever since then, we have been trying to pick up those pieces and rebuild what our ancestors had in the past. And sometimes we find the wrong pieces, and sometimes we find what. Now the thing with I'm glad you brought up the thing with the All Father, because I've never seen one in recent years. I have stopped seeing it that way. That's definitely God. That's Jehovah. Okay, the idea of an All Father, right? Now, if you look at the Indo-European pantheons, they're always tripartite. They're always triple goddesses, triple gods. Like you have in Ireland, it's Eru, Folda, and Bamba, the three goddesses of Ireland, right? You have the Hindus, you have Shiva, Vishnu, and Shiva,
Oh,
Vishnu, Brahman,
yeah.
and you have. So I'm more inclined to think that it's really a tripartite thing. It's really Votan, Donar, and Loki, and they all represent the three aspects of the god, and ultimately a reflection of the personality and the complexities of the human psyche and the aspects of the cosmos. They're all reflected there, light and shadow, the whole thing. And so I think that's what was. If you're to really look at, if you're no, I'm not a Nordic pagan, and this is one of the things I'm going to annoy people now, but you have a congregationalism, which a churchiness has, which has brought itself into northern paganism, particularly in Presbyterian countries like Iceland and in America, where you have almost like priests and religious services and churches, and it's all looking very churchy and Abrahamic to me. And I don't think it was like that at all. And instead of saying amen, they're saying hail or whatever. I don't know what they do. Instead of a communion wafer, they have a wine, they have ale. I don't know what they do, but or mead or whatever. It's all to me. It's the
Yeah.
same thing. It's the same bullshit. And like I don't think that actually went on back then. I think this is like, I think I think Nordic paganism is about 100 years behind Celtic paganism revival. We've already gone through our Wicca, the druid weirdo with a staff out in a cloak out, the weirdo, the sex freak with a staff outside his yurt. We've already passed through that, right? And we've now come back to, you had the guys dressed in white calling themselves druids at Stonehenge. We've kind of gone past that, and we're now getting back to a kind of a pure thing. The Nordic paganism is still only really there, and it's still based on. Oh, I have the box set of Vikings, therefore I'm a pagan. This kind of thing. So you guys are still suffering from that handicap, but it'll pass. It'll pass quickly. How do you
Yeah,
feel
no,
about that?
yeah, no, I do think you're right. Kind of looking at what we're doing, or what the majority is doing. I mean, you could see it like church services. We're offering something and saying prayers to the gods and all of that, and indeed, the hail thing is very, very popular to say. You see that still too much, indeed. I never even looked at it that way, but now that you mention it, that is very much what is going on. It's why I always try to tell people that, like, worshiping the gods or being thankful for the gods, you can do that in everyday life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just by being a good person, by being the best version of yourself that you can be. Yes, of course, on the solstices you can have those major parties and whatever you want. That's all fine. It's that is uh culturally appropriate, that is historically accurate. They are the turning points in the year, of course. But it doesn't have to be a major thing every time. Like, you don't have to, if you want something from the gods, or if you want help from the gods. I shouldn't say if you want something from them. It's still like the whole Abrahamic
Yeah.
thing. Like, I want something from you, because you're supposed to give me that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Spiritual welfare, I call it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, pretty much. I do believe that Germanic paganism, Nordic paganism, it is, as you said, still trying to
Find its
shed
roots.
the Abrahamic cloak, which is tough. We have the text, and we have the major researchers, but it's hard,
I, I
because
I always go back to Hinduism. That's an unbroken line back to the ancient ancestors in terms of spiritual practice. And the temples are just boxes with the different effigies in them, statues, whatever. And if today you want something from Kali, you go in and you ask Kali for something, and you want something from Krishna, you go down the road, and a few months later go in again. There's no regular services. There's no congregationalism. There's no priest. The priest only, well, the priests only look after the temple. They take care of it, but they don't actually run services. And then, like you said, you have the feast days. So they have their holy, and they have their other feast days. And it's the same. It's the same with our ancestors, that they would have had a grove that may have had statues and effigies and stones in it, that they would have offered sacrifice up to the gods, and then they left. And when they needed something down the road, if their wife was pregnant and had complications, they might go down and ask, like, some goddess for help with that, and then go and sacrifice something, give money to the poor, whatever, and then go back off and do something else. And then you'd have the solstice. Oh, by the way, solstice greetings to yourself and everyone. And they would have that, and they would have a festival at Samhain, or a festival at some blots or something now and again, and that was that. That was that. But this congregationalism, and you get Nordic paganism, people have to be careful with that stuff. It may be, I understand, be always careful of, uh, is the Abrahamic thing here seeping in through the back door? We're trying to undo 1,400 years of programming. It's not going to happen overnight.
no, well, if only it would make life just so much easier. But yeah, 1400 years is it's a hell of a long time, and I totally missed, by the way, that today is the solstice. So to everyone watching, to everyone listening, happy solstice, merry solstice, however you say it. Just have a good one. How important would you say is having a altar? Whether that be a altar for dedicated to your ancestors, your family, or the gods, because that's one thing that is still very much a thing that is like still kind of disputed. Like, some people think it's very important, and others are like, just
Oh, I think it's very important. I think you should have an altar in everyone's home. You see, what happens was the Abrahamics took the altar out of the home and put it in the church. And instead of a picture of your grandmother, or something belonging to your great grandparents, or someone, an uncle, or even a friend that died you worked with years ago, may have died in the army or something, what they have is a picture of a rabbi nailed to a stick in the Middle East. That's what they did. They took the altar out of home. If you go to Hinduism again, I come back to that. The altar was in the home. There's a celebration of the ancestors. It's a very big deal to them. And ours would have been exactly the same. So you would have had a comb belonging to your great auntie Freya or something like that, and it would have been there, or something similar, and they would have been like a held votive art relic held, and it was a way of saying, I'm here because of you guys, thank you, blah blah blah. And it was yeah, absolutely, I'm down with the altars completely. They are a very important thing. And again, it's the sanctity of the home. You see, I've written lots of books on magic and occultism, and the people don't do enough to protect the sanctity of their own home. And when you take a picture of Jesus, an image of Jesus Christ or the Virgin Mary, and you bring it into your house, you violated the magical sanctity and spiritual sanctity of your home by bringing in an outsider. Where I doubt very much if they would have had statues of Jupiter or Zeus or anyone else in the pagan pantheon in their homes. I don't think they did. In fact, there's a very interesting theory as to why the pagans, the Hellenic and the Roman pagans, had specific temples dedicated to specific gods and goddesses, that if it was hit by lightning, they would know that Athena or Zeus was annoyed. I always thought that was kind of genius, so they wouldn't mix. They wouldn't have mixed effigies inside the church. So the way it was, so if lightning hit a temple or an earthquake took it down, they says, okay, Athena is pissed off for us for something, or Hecate, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the altar at home is important, and it doesn't have to be anything ornate or fantastic. It can be a memento. It can be a book of an album, that kind of thing. It can be anything, but it should be, and you don't even have to venerate it all the time. It can be just kept there as part of a story. You see, one of the things is when a religion comes into conquest, like an Abrahamic religion, its primary function is to cut off the past, a great reset. We're in the second one now, and they're trying to foist a second great reset upon us. Is to cut the past off so you begin with a fresh, clean slate. And so, therefore, the altar was removed from the sanctity of the magical space of the home and placed into a place where a priest, who was ultimately a Roman agent, a Roman imperial agent, could actually monitor your comings and goings. It was the police state, really. I mean, people don't understand how sinister the whole thing of the church services and all that stuff was. This is why the Romans brought it in. As the Roman Empire was declining, they saw a religion that could be a way of controlling people. So, this is why you had, like, in 1612, King James II of England and Scotland issued an edict that everyone had to be in Presbyterian churches for Good Friday, and anyone who wasn't was a Catholic or a witch, and that's how it was always been used. So they knew that the ones who weren't in church were either Catholic or witches, and they seized them, they arrest them. So there was all kinds. Oh yeah, I mean, you start. What do you think the church register baptismal certs and all this stuff is all about, and the records of baptisms and deaths and all that? This was the Roman state. They're not joking when they say all roads lead back to Rome. This was, the Abrahamic Christian religion was set up absolutely as a kind of a police state, a way of monitoring who was on side and who wasn't. And if the churches were full, we're winning. If the churches are empty, well, we got to do something about it.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I mean, religion has always, well, the major religions, at least, so the Abrahamic religions, has been very much a way of controlling people, indeed. And the one thing that I always say, like, maybe half jokingly, like, if money is the root of all evil, then why does the church always ask for money?
Well, confession, my God, what is that? A total violation of privacy. Go and confess your life to the priest, and in Ireland there was in Ireland in 1798 there was an uprising against the English. The 1798 uprising by a group called the United Irishmen. There was an actual full-scale war against the English control. And there's a song from it called The Croppy Boy. And the song talks about the boy giving his confession to the priest and talking about, we've trained hard, we have soldiers ready, they're stationed here, my good friend there. And at the end of the song, the priest jumps up and pulls off his cloak, and he's an English officer in full robes. Now, what that song means is they were telling people, if you go to the priest and you confess before a battle, he will go straight down. The Catholic priest calls himself Irish, will always align with the power structure. He will go right down to the British officer and he'll say, this young guy and these guys down here, they've formed a militia and they're ready to attack tonight. And and then when I see Irish people say the church has stood by us, it was the Catholic Church who gave Ireland to the English. It was the Catholic Church who maintained control over those, and that the Catholic Church is about, that's our main enemy through history, and yet we're told that they were the ones who freed us and all this crap, who gave us faith in our darkest hour. I mean, they didn't. They always stood by the British Empire.
Yeah, like I wonder, like going to confession, like how many secrets would those priests know, like, and how much would they, like, even nowadays, how much would they spill, even with the whole like pandemic, quote unquote pandemic. I've seen, well, I haven't seen it myself, but like banners on the church, like Jesus is not going to save you, get pricked. And it's like that defeats the whole purpose now, doesn't it? And people always, they love to consider themselves heroes. They always say, like, they always go back or reach back to the Second World War, and like I would definitely, I would give Anne Frank that place to hide and all of that. But like what we have seen is that 90% of the people who say they would be on the side of the good guys and on the side of the of the Jews and all that, they rat you out in an instant. And makes me wonder, like, how many people would have got trouble by priests just spilling the beans, spilling those confessions. Because I mean, that is, as you said, it is an invasion of privacy. You're telling basically your darkest inner secret, the things that you really don't want anyone else to know. You're telling the priest because he says, oh, if you do that, then you're clean again and God will forgive you and all of that. Like, I do wonder how many people would have gotten into trouble, because I mean, if they truly are rats like that, then I imagine just the same thing going on in these times.
There was no difference between the ones who ratted out Anne Frank and her family and the ones who were wearing the mask saying "Stay home, save lives." That was you. That you did that. You were the same person. You were the same person, and you see, this is another aspect of it: cowardice. If you have to seek salvation, and when we talk about salvation, we're really talking about the dharma, the fulfillment of your life, the purpose of your life, through an external force, through things like prayer and going to confession and reading a Bible. You'll never attain that entirely inside you. You will never be. You see, the purpose of the gods and paganism to say the path to honor, really, this is why they made such a big deal of it, is to actually go through all the shit and deal with your own shit and atone for your own shit if you've caused, and that's the end of it. And that's, and no one's going to save your own ass except yourself. And when you have a situation, again, this is why the Romans loved Christianity. Those Roman traitors loved Christianity, because it gave them all this stuff through. The state is now your savior. The state is now God. And where in pagan times, people would have been less likely to do that. They would have been. This is why communism and Marxism and Abrahamism are so similar. They're all about salvation by the adherence to the state. But the notion of you making a sacrifice, the notion of you suffering, I have to do this. It's going to cause suffering to me and others probably, but it has to be done. It's the only way out of it. And then you say, why did I do that? Why did I? Okay, you have an affair with your brother's wife, okay, and you think about it later, and you go, I really shouldn't have done that. That was really a fucked up thing I did. I've got to find a way to atone for that somehow. I've got to, maybe I don't want him to find out because he might be upset about it, but I've got to do something to really fucking atone for that. A serious sacrifice. I don't know. I'm going to give all half of my pay for months to the homeless on the streets. Something like that. Find something. But if you just go to a priest and say, I shagged my sister-in-law and I feel bad about it, all your sins are forgiven, that's the end of that. What have you learned? Where's the personal growth? Because if someone actually transforms your bad deeds into sacrifice, there's an element of contemplation. You're learning, you're exploring yourself, you're going inside and saying, that's my shadow. My shadow is dark, and I've got to solve that shadow. In that particular situation, the darkest aspects, came to the surface. The demons rose up. I've got to deal with this somehow. And then that kind of thing, and people, you're never told that. You're told that you go to the church and ask God for forgiveness. In Catholics and Protestants, just Jesus forgives me. The Lord forgives me. These Christian ministers in America that are found with prostitutes like Jimmy Swaggart. I have sinned and the Lord forgives me. This kind of thing. I'm so sorry. I've sinned. But that's redemption and sacrifice are two different things. You don't redeem yourself. You sacrifice. You have to. You'll only attain your honor if you apply the level of hurt that you did to your brother-in-law to yourself. You understand that the amount of pain, if he found out that his brother that he loved and his wife that he loved had an affair, how that would affect him. Only that level of pain that you must sacrifice, and that's honor. And that's why our ancestors went to wars and stuff a lot of the times, because they wanted to actually cleanse themselves of things like that and burn it out into an exchange of energy. When you go to the church, where's the exchange of energy? What do you get from it? You get nothing. You get nothing. You don't. I'll come back next week after I beat up that old lady and took her money. I'll just go back next week and ask Jesus to forgive me. What do you learn? Where do you grow? And this is why we have a world in the Western world. What we have are a world full of children, adult children, who have not grown up. And this is why you have drag queen story time and the Pride movement and all these snowflakes and people. Trump derangement syndrome and Elon Musk things that are completely meaningless to your life, that you make the center of your misery and you cause yourself anguish with, is because we have adult children who have not sacrificed. Sacrifice is the key to your own happiness.
Enjoy listening to podcasts and ever wonder, can I make a podcast? But it seems so complicated, and good audio production can take time. What if there was a way to create an amazing podcast easily? Well, now there is. Introducing Podcasting Made Easy from Podtastic Audio. My production team will handle your entire audio production, allowing you to be the star of your show. This is Podcasting Made Easy. How easy? Well, so easy, you don't even have to press record. Now that's easy. Your listeners are waiting. Let's deliver. Sign up for a free strategy call today at podcasticaudio.com/easy.
Yeah, I think this is a good comment from Lila. Personally, I think Christianity is for the younger souls, whereas paganism is for the older ones. I do like that.
Yeah. That's a pretty good one. I like that too.
Yeah, but like it is indeed like, what do you learn? You learn that, to say a couple Hail Marys and like all is forgiven. It's the easy way out. And like I do think, and that has very much come with Abrahamism and later, into the whole political spectrum, and that there is someone will come to save us, whether that be, Jesus or God or
Or the
Trump
world,
or Elon or Ye, or I don't I still don't know if we consider Kanye a good guy or a bad guy now.
the world
Um,
economic, everything, and we're going to
oh,
be
they're the last ones to save us.
we're going to be punished by climate change or melting ice caps. It's the Book of Revelations is just rebuilt over and over again. And I
Yeah.
hear these people say to me, like I'll have people deal with me, what are the globalists? And I say they're Abrahamics. No, they're Satanists and Lucifer. No, they're not. They're classic Abrahamics. Do what they say, or the ice caps will melt. It's exactly the same thing as the Book of Revelations. Do as we say, or your soul doesn't go. The rapture won't take you to heaven. And it's exactly the same playbook used over and over again. They're not Satanists. We'd be actually better off if they were Satanists. We'd have a much happier world than what we have now. And that's true, because Satanism is just really about like just no bullshit, just being direct and honest. And so it's like, oh, they're devil. No, they're Jesus worshippers. They're Abraham worshippers. They're using the same playbook, but they want to wipe us all out. Well, go and read Leviticus. Go and read what Jehovah did to the Canaanites and did to the Pharisees. Then tell me if they're not Abrahamics. They're absolutely to their core Abrahamics.
Yeah, that's the one thing I find funny. Speaking of Satanism and the devil and all of that. Like, if you look in the Bible, Jehovah or God has a very much a larger body count than the devil does.
I know,
but still he's considered the good guy.
I know a great role in my pagan path was actually Satanism. I read the Devil's Bible by Anton LaVey when I was about 14 or 15. And I have to say that book to this day still resonates greatly with me. It just all it did was spoke about those kind of hypocrisies that you just mentioned within Christianity. And it basically, it gave lots of things like the old pagan religions were good for this and good for that and so on. And so there was a lot of there was a lot of good information for me in Anton LaVey's work. And so, this is the other thing about we being pagans, right? We don't go, I only believe in Lu and everything else is a sin. I only believe in Votan, everything else. Pagans will actually even, like Hindus, will actually even look at some Christian philosophies and say, that's not bad. I like that. I like what that guy said. And I like what she said. And you go and you get that in paganism too. They'll say something like, or in Hinduism, they'll say similar, like they'll you have it in Hindu temples in the forecourt. You might even have a statue of the Virgin Mary next to Buddha, because there'll be something there that someone liked about it, but it doesn't become the central focus. It's not in the temple. It's outside it. It's this kind of thing. And so a pagan would sit back and go, oh, I like what Anton LaVey wrote in the Devil's Bible, in the Satanic Bible. That's okay. That's cool. I like that. But that doesn't mean you're becoming a Satanist. It's an incorporation. It's an influence. It's a thing. We're you look at the work of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell. They weren't pagans, but it was all about that idea. Every story has a good story within it, and you can't be a fanatic. That to me is the greatest reason to become a pagan. You won't become a fanatic. You won't become a fanatic.
Yeah, that's the one thing you still see a lot of those Abrahamic people saying that only our God is a true God, and all the other gods, like your gods, they're just demons pretending to be gods. And
their religion is probably the ultimate example of that.
Yeah, I can't stand those comments, and I want to bet I don't have a lot of knowledge of of Christianity or Catholicism. I never read the Bible, but still with my grandparents, they were Roman Catholic. My parents were raised Roman Catholic. They eventually fell off their faith. Now they're I don't really know what they are, but it doesn't really matter. They're still good people even without religion, which is something. I
know a pagan will always judge a person on their personality. We don't give a shit what God you worship. That's the irony of Christianity flourished under paganism. Why? because we're tolerant. We're by our nature, we're tolerant. I mean, if you read Catherine Nixie's The Darkening Age, it was the tolerance for Christianity which made Christians dissemble armies and militia groups in order to take down Rome. It was our tolerance was our problem. We were too kind. We were too nice. We said, "Oh, what is your God?" Okay, if you look at the history of the powerful pagan empires, whether they be the Hindus, whether they be the Romans or the Greeks, it's always the same. Minority religions flourished and were left alone.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like I do see that pagans, or like the real pagans, they're a lot more tolerant, and still I do believe that I know more of the Abrahamic faiths than your average Christian knows of paganism.
But even the average average Christian knows nothing about Christianity. You can actually say they all think it's all this loving religion of all peace and Jesus. And then you point out to them that in the Gospel of St. Matthew, Jesus Christ refers to pagans children as dogs. It's like, no, he didn't. It's in your own book. Please read the Synoptic Gospel. They know nothing about. They're the most ignorant people of all when it comes to knowing about their own religion.
Yeah, most Christians, like they'll have a Bible on their nightstand because that's what a good Christian is supposed to have, but they never read one word of it. Which is hilarious in a way. Like how do I, as a pagan, how do I know your religion better than you do yourself?
I know. They put Bibles in hotel rooms to like give you comfort to the stranger, I can guarantee you pick up that Bible, that Gideon's Bible, and you flick through it. And you have 2 pages open in front of you, and somewhere in those 2 pages, the so-called God is killing someone or raping them or murdering them. And then you say, "Oh, this is the God of peace and love,"
Oh yeah, totally. Just wipes out humanity because of shit that we did, but he is loving and caring and no, I don't think so.
When he raped Mary of Nazareth to impregnate her with Jesus, it was like an out and out rape, and then you're like, oh, she had immaculate conception. She was raped,
Yeah, and like immaculate conception, that must have not been a pleasant birth. If like that was, truly your first time, if you are truly a virgin and you give birth, that must have been hell. That must have been hell to go through.
Joseph the cuckold, he knows that.
Oh God!
And so that's like, oh, the ultimate cuckold, Joseph.
Yeah.
What? Basically, they had a cuckold chair in the nativity scene. That's why he should be.
But it's okay because it was God.
In the nativity scene, you would have the cuckold chair for Joseph to sit in, while Jehovah is doing the business with his wife, and people don't think about that. I mean, if you were to explain it to a pagan, they would burst out laughing. I could imagine in the early days of paganism, before the main big saints came along, and you had these hermits and zealots who infiltrated Europe, and they told them the story of well, hold on a second, this guy shagged his wife, got her pregnant, and he looked after the baby, and he was okay with it, and they would have burst out laughing. They would have just burst out laughing. But they had to change the culture first, and then sell them the bullshit.
Yeah, because like where is the honor in that? Raising someone else's child. Like indeed, as you said,
only out of kindness and goodness, yes.
Yeah, but no, of course. I mean,
in order to do it,
Yeah, I mean, like I have 2 children of my own. I got a beautiful daughter and a an amazing son. But my daughter, I mean, technically she isn't mine, but I have been raising her. I have been the only stable father figure in her life ever since she was like a year and a half old, and she'll be turning 8 in April. So
but that's done out of love and human decency.
Yeah,
it's not done because Dunbar told you to do it or else.
Oh no,
Yeah,
no. I mean, Donar would be the last one to tell me.
yeah, I know, but
He tell,
that's the Abrahamic message, though, isn't it? Do it or else. And it was
yeah,
done for selfish reasons. I'm too busy up here in the clouds, yeah, passing judgment. You have the hard work of raising a child.
yeah, and that's the one thing that that kept me from Catholicism, kept me from Christianity, because like I tried the whole thing because I mean it's easy, it's there, why not? It's always been the believe or else, do as I say or else. It's that part that really just struck a nerve with me. It just brought on too much stress
Yep.
because I was always, watching my words, watching my deeds, watching like what I'm thinking, and I couldn't. I was like, nah, this is not for me. I can't do this. This is too much. Like how do people do this? Like how do they live
I know.
like this?
The amount of dissociation that's needed to be a Christian is incredible.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Prince of Peace and the God of Love, and he has armies with like crucifixes on their, banners and what? We're killing in the name of love. We're killing in the name of peace. This whole everything. It's like you have to gaslight yourself literally every moment of every hour in order to be a good Christian.
Yeah. Comes to mind the very popular saying, like, bombing for peace is like fucking for virginity.
Yeah, exactly. And the beautiful thing about paganism is that our gods and goddesses are all flawed. They're just like us. That's actually a big thing. None of them claim to be perfect. They get drunk. They have their wives fight with them. They do stupid things, and
oh boy, do they!
Yeah, that's because they're us. They're us.
Yeah.
And they're us, and they're us extrapolated into a kind of a super archetype that we kind of like can use as a role model rather than a guide in our lives, where it's a role model rather than an edict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very, very well put, very, very beautifully said, and especially the fighting with the wives. Like Donar, he may be the strongest god of all, but he doesn't dare go against his wife.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have to laugh at that expression. What would Jesus do? Well, he make some furniture and then walk around the desert with a bunch of taxes.
Yeah, for 40 days and 40 nights. Even though if you like look it up on Google Maps, it's what, like not even a day. It's like, how do you walk around in the desert for 40 days and just like not die from dehydration or starvation? Or I mean, they're beautiful stories in the Bible, but I mean that's about it.
I had an idea for a one of these fleeting ideas I have on the train now and again to write a movie script that ends nowhere, but I had an idea that why was Jesus was a carpenter and he was crucified on a cross. The idea would be that one of the apprentices that was in Joseph's workshop was the guy that built the cross to actually crucify.
Ooh.
Now, okay, that's heavy, but think about it. Isn't that really a pagan kind of aspect to it? If you wanted to paganize the story of Jesus, well, he had a guy beside him who was actually resentful of him, and he was the one who eventually built the crucifix to nail him to. Wouldn't more people find that more deeply meaningful? Think about it, because you're saying, like, instead of that, we're told for the first 33 years of his life he did nothing. But then this adds another aspect to it, the aspects of fate, karma, and dharma, as well as and then the story has a real meaning, that the guy who had this resentment for him is the one who actually builds his cross. Now that you would find that that's a great thing. I forget about it. That's what I'm like, I have these great ideas. I forget. Well, yeah, it's like I would find Christianity much more interesting then. Imagine it was someone like Judas and he held this resentment against him. But no, you're not given. You ever notice that Christian stories and Abrahamic stories are full of loose ends? Like, well, okay, tell us about when he was a carpenter. What really happened? Oh, nothing happened. And that's why people throw in things like Mary Magdalene, and he went to India and stuff like that. And they're usually fairly airy fairy. But what about Jesus for the first 30 years or whatever? It was really dark. It was like an alcoholic womanizer. That's the guy these guys had up against them. I think that would be a much more appealing Jesus character, because at the end, the sum total of his life would have full meaning as a man rather than as a mystical figure.
Yeah, and I think that is indeed what you find a lot more in paganism. Our gods are, well, archetypes. Indeed, they are, well, much easier to relate to as well, because they are flawed, because they are, I mean, in a way, they are still human, even though they are, I guess, more enlightened than us in a way.
No pagan god would ask him to sacrifice his only son on a rock.
Oh, hell no.
And no pagan would obey a god that would tell him to do that, because of the assumption, it's if you look in Hinduism, the assumption would be that's a demon pretending to be the god. I will not sacrifice my son. Where in Christianity, Abrahamism, Abraham was ready to stick the knife right, and that's the touchstone for all the three great religions, as they call them. A guy who was going to kill his son for voices in his head.
Yeah. I'm actually. It's funny that you bring that up. I'm actually reading a book by a Dutch author. He is lovingly called the Dutch Dan Brown, because his books are very much in the same line, written in the same way, like just very easy to get through, but very well written. And he starts off his book, or the book that I'm reading now, with the story of Abraham sacrificing his son, and that nowhere in that passage it says that eventually his son goes back down the mountain with him. It's implied, but it's never said. It's only like Abraham with his slaves eventually makes his way to, what is it, like Israel or Jerusalem or whatever.
Egypt.
And just somewhere. And I think that's beautiful. And I've now come to a point in the book where even I believe it's a Catholic priest acknowledges, and this is how you know it's fiction, but acknowledges that, yeah, that's one thing that I never got. That's the one thing I still wonder myself. And, like, how did it end? Where did his son go?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he wasn't sacrificed, or, they say he wasn't sacrificed, was, replaced by a goat or whatever. But then where is he? Where does it say that he comes down the mountain with his father?
And Isaac is a whole other character and a whole other story. This is the thing too. You bring up a very good point. Then, anyone who's watching this video and considering moving towards paganism, I think it's very important not to hate Christianity or any other Abrahamic religion. You can laugh at the absurdities in it, but we often laugh at the absurdities in our own spiritual things as well.
Oh yeah.
But like, you're not going to become a good pagan by hating Christians or hating Jews or hating Muslims. I mean, and also as a pagan, yeah, with all this shit, I could still walk by a beautiful cathedral or a beautiful mosque or something like that, or I can hear some rabbi singing in Hebrew some prayer from the Torah, and I cannot deny the beauty in that. And so, therefore, that's what being a pagan as well. You can appreciate that it's not binary thinking of good and bad. There's lots of gray area, and I think some emerging. I've been accused of hating Christians. I don't hate any Christians. I have loads of close friends who are Christians. I don't hate Catholicism or anything like that. I'm frightened by jihad and crusade, and I guess the only thing about it, jihad and crusade as a pagan and what was done to my ancestors makes me nervous. But that doesn't mean I have a hatred against any Christian or any Muslim or anything like that. It's, and so that's the whole thing. We don't have binary thinking. So I do meet pagans in the early days, and they're kind of become very anti-Christian. That's a stage. You're born out of that eventually, and then one day you'll be walking down the street and see you'll see a picture of Roman Michelangelo, a little statue of the Pieta, and you say, well, you can't deny the beauty and the magnificence in that. And so therefore, that's a beautiful part of being a pagan, is that you learn a form of tolerance, because this is all part of the journey, the sacrifice, the learning, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you see that a lot still, that people who call themselves pagan are merely pagan because they are, well, quite literally anti-Christ.
Yeah, you get that a lot in American pagan circles. I mean, a lot of them, like, I have quite a lot of pagan followers in the US, and a lot of them in the military there are ex-military, and some of them are quite anti-Christian. And I'm saying it's when you think about it, I said, when you have a hatred or something, it's generally insecurity about it. You're afraid of it at some level, and therefore you're worried that it could damage you at some level. So the thing is to actually not see it as a threat, and then it will just vanish. Because it's really about, that's another thing. This like sort of like this heroic lord, and being inspired by the likes of, say, Cuchulainn or Wotan, Odin, is this notion that, like, you've got to actually go through the shit. And when you go through the real hard shit, the little small shit like philosophical, political, or religious differences don't exist anymore. That's what I'm saying earlier on about so many adult children today. They've never really suffered in their lives. Therefore, they have nightmares about Elon Musk owning Twitter, when the when they should be having, because they've never had any problems in their lives of any great magnitude.
Yeah, you see that a lot too with the like, there are many popular TikTok videos of a day in the life of someone working at Twitter or Google or whatever, and those companies, they are basically adult daycare.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've worked as a cook. I've worked as a chef for close to 11 years, and when I see those videos, I'm like, I do more in an hour than you do in your whole day.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And so they go to university, they get a degree on to sit around all day playing video games and being influencers on Instagram, and they've no understanding of the real world, none.
No, and I think that's, weak men create hard times, and we're definitely seeing that now. And indeed, like you said, if your biggest fear is some billionaire taking over a social media platform, while all other social media platforms, or the bigger ones, are owned by other billionaires, it's like, what are you worried about? Like, why is this something that you are so upset about? Like, it doesn't affect you in any way.
Yeah, it's like the old adage: every great civilization begins as Stoic and dies as Epicurean. And that's exactly, we're absolutely at the end of the Epicurean thing here. And the only thing on the other end of this will be Stoicism. And again, that's another lesson from our pagan ancestors. There's so many lessons in pagan mythology, philosophy, and religion, spirituality, that's so useful to us today. That's another reason I wish people would embrace it more, because there's so many, it provides a phenomenal toolkit for the present day survival of your sanity.
Yeah, it definitely does. And as a final word, we're over an hour in. I mean, I can go on and on, but I don't want to make it too long. As a final word,
I'll come back and we'll do another one.
Awesome.
After
Thank you.
In the new year, yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. Like after Friday, after the 23rd, I'm taking a bit of a break. Anyway, I've been doing a lot, been doing too much. But what would you recommend as well, sources, just general sources for budding pagans or people who are interested in paganism and want to learn more, want to know more? Where would you recommend they go to or look into?
Yeah, people ask me this all the time. It's a very hard one to answer because they say, "What's a good book to learn paganism from?" And I says, "Well, you don't understand. We're not, as the Muslims say, people of the book. We don't have a canon or a text or a book of rules or a Ten Commandments. So it's very difficult." But I do point to certain things, like I say, like, well, a good way to begin is to study the mythology of your ancient ancestors, to read up on that, get up on that. Because there's lots of that will actually shift your consciousness. A good book to read that's come out in recent years is The Darkening Age by Catherine Nixie, which talks about the end of the Roman pagan empire and the beginning of the Christian empire. And that will undo any notions that you're, somehow a failed Jew and you're supposed to be like somehow Middle Eastern. And I'm not putting Jewish people down. I'm just saying from what they did to us, and so on. And I think that book is very kind of therapeutic in that it says, okay, I'm not, it's like am I Christian? I'm not really, am I? I just got to be programmed this way. And it shows you like the horrific horrors that was unleashed against the pagans at the end, after the Edict of Milan. And then you have, there's some silly stereotypes about paganism. One is that it's a nature-based religion. It's not. That comes from the hippie base. That's a part of it, but that's not necessarily it. That's not necessarily it. I would say the fundamentals of paganism would be, a belief that our consciousness can change reality, that we are all somehow expressions of gods in some way, and that reincarnation is also an aspect to it as well. So, but communication of nature is actually a beautiful way of doing it, rather than thinking I'm a nature spirit. No, don't be like that. Go camp in the woods. Go for a walk. I mean, go challenge yourself. A big part of it is challenge. Like there's a bog, quite a dangerous bog near where I live, and it's not safe to cross at night. And there's one footpath. It's like the Dead March, literally in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And one step in the direction, you're dead. Well, when I was first diving into this world deeply, I would walk across that bog in pitch blackness at night, risking my life. And by the time I got to their end, that would be an amazing, elated feeling. And it made me realize that I was calling upon the powers inside myself to achieve that. So there's lots of books out there. I really couldn't recommend one on paganism. I mean, I've got a book called The Druid Code, and I'm not pushing it, but that might help people. That might help people understand where I was coming from, and it might help you. But it's not like anything like this is the word. This was just how I came to where I am. And there's loads of other books like that, but read them all, see what sits with you, see what feels right inside your heart, and the gods and goddesses will guide you to the rest of the way. And that's basically it. But try and break from this notion of there should be a touchstone. There should be like communication with the ancient woods and stuff. I find very powerful. So it's a slow, like we're dealing with 1400 years of ancestral programming that you have to undo. And we're not going to undo that overnight. So don't expect to wake up tomorrow morning and be a druid or a satyr. Don't expect that. or Merlin or something, but understand that it's a beautiful journey, and you'll see it in every. I see paganism in everything now, even in science fiction stories, and that's another important thing. Don't believe it is a religion or a spiritual tradition from the past. Don't believe you're living in the Middle Ages, because there will be pagans who build rocket ships, supercomputers, and and we embrace technology because there's a story there too. So that's another one. Don't get stuck in this thing that if I've become a pagan, I have to either to develop the aesthetic or the mindset of someone in the Middle Ages. No, you be a pagan now. And you looked, and I find Hinduism is a great one as well. There's some great books on Hinduism and videos out there on Hinduism, and everything that can kind of help to dissolve the Abrahamic kind of like overcoating on you, brings the pagan soul out. So that's what I would suggest to people. And also enjoy it. Enjoy the journey. Don't feel you have to do it to get to heaven or Asgard or somewhere like that. Do it for Tir na Og. do it because out of love and out of happiness, not out of an interest. You'll find that the pagan path, I know you probably the same. It's tremendously interesting, and you meet all kinds of interesting people that have and they're all different. They've all come with their own different way, but they're all ultimately doing it their own way. So there's a fantastic diversity in paganism, and it didn't stop in the Middle Ages. It continues to the present. So that's what I would say to people.
Yeah, I've come to find that is indeed the biggest challenge, to not get stuck in that Middle Age Viking time. I've been in at least one group who was very much stuck in that, and it's really hard to grow. It's really hard to find your path if that's the only path that is being walked. And I guess that comes with tolerance and being open-minded and exploring other things, exploring other pantheons, and as you said, like no pagans are the same. A good friend of mine from the tribe, he is a Germanic pagan as well, but we're still very much different. He practices in his way, I practice in my way, but we believe in the same gods, we believe in the same pantheon.
That's the way it should be. It's very easy to call yourself a Viking in the 21st century when you have central heating, 4 meals a day. You don't have to sleep outdoors. Your balls aren't crawling with lice and this kind of thing. It's very easy to call yourself a pagan when you don't have to live in the hardships of those times. So people need to remind themselves of that now and again. No. You're not a warrior if you go home at the end of the day to a nice centrally heated apartment and a steak dinner.
No, it's. Be happy that you have those luxuries, but don't fool yourself.
They would have loved it. They would have loved it too. Yeah.
Oh boy, would they?
Yeah, you're not covered in intestinal worms and all this kind of thing.
Oh God. So just enjoy the luxuries, but don't fool yourself.
Don't fool yourself, and prepare yourself for your next life, especially if you get over 50 and you're still a young man. But like me, I'm actually actively trying to prepare myself for the next part of the journey. So it's all about, and it's a beautiful thing, actually. I have to say, like when I come back, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make corrections to what I did in that. And it takes the whole thing of the fear-based thing of like, oh, if I don't do this, I won't be allowed past St. Peter into heaven. That's all gone. Mm-hmm. And you're learning. You're being wise. You're being. You're writing the saga that is yourself when you become paganism. When you become into paganism.
That's beautiful. I like that. Yeah. You're writing your own saga.
Yes. Yeah, the good and the bad. It's all part of the same thing.
Yes, I think that's a great point to end it on. Thank you so much for coming. Is there anything you like to plug? Is there anything that you're working on now that the good people should check out?
I'm currently working on a documentary on the Pendle Witches, which was a witchcraft trial that took place in the 1600s, early 1600s in England, with my friend Dean MacDonald. It's a big project. It's not going to be out till next year, but look out for that. And if you want to check out stuff like what I do, I'm interested in a lot of things, but my Beyond Room 313 channel on YouTube is probably the best place for that. There's a lot of pagan-y kind of stuff and megalithic exploration and all that kind of stuff in there.
Awesome. I have already put some links up in the description. If there's any more that you would like in there, just send them in an email. Let me know. I'll put them in there.
Yep.
So yeah, this was a great talk. I absolutely enjoyed this. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yep.
I would love to have you on again, but in the new year, of course. It's getting late in the year, and we're all going to be busy with Christmas, Yule, the New Year. So
I'm working in a restaurant. I'm sure you're very, very busy. But anyway,
oh yeah, no, I had to quit. Unfortunately, two bad knees and a bad back will have you quit. But I have something new lined up already. It's I'm just in a in between period, in between phase at the moment. So
well, this is great. I really enjoyed myself. So to you and all your listeners, good Yule, Merry Solstice, Sounds End, Yo Saturnalia, and we'll see you when the sun rises again. Take care.
yes, we will. Thank you. This has been the Greyhorn Pagans podcast with your host Stein Fox and Thomas Sheridan. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening, and have a good day. Until next time. See ya.